Hey folks, my name is Dave. Welcome to our shop here at NTD Racing. Right behind me is Lefty, which is our new budget trophy truck that we're building. Hoping to get ready for the next Baja 1000. We'll see how that goes. Anyway, what today's video is all about is I'm going to show you how we make the front of the chassis of this vehicle using BendTech and a couple other pieces of software. So the whole part that basically cradles the engine area and then makes up that front suspension. And then to do that, not only will I be using BendTech software and showing you how I construct things in BendTech, but I'm also going to show you how I either analyze the suspension in this really cool app from a company called Race Aspirations, and then also some Fusion 360 to make sure I got the clearances right and all that. And we'll get all that stuff together, and I'm going to show you exactly how to do that. Another great resource is if you check the comments below. I find that a lot of guys leave me some really good constructive comments, you know, because I'm not the pro at this. This is my second chassis I built. We built Honcho. This is the second one. I am learning all the time, and I always read the comments and appreciate the ones that are really constructive and give me good information. I'll try to share that with all of you, but check the comments. And with that, please consider hitting the like and subscribe as well. There's a lot to talk about in this build video. Let's go ahead and get to it. All right, this video might just be a little bit mind-blowing when it comes to the intense geometries that we're going to be working with, and we're going to use a bunch of different programs to flesh out how we're going to build the front of the chassis. Last video, if you watched that part one of this, is we built the roll cage, and it was really dimensionally intensive trying to make sure that the roll cage comes all the way out to the fiberglass without exceeding the limits of the fiberglass. And I think that we're good with that. I probably did that thing 3 times to get through that. But now we're working on some of the things that we're going to try to fit underneath the hood of this thing. And check these out. These are the Milestar Patagonia Mud Terrain 40 13.5 R17s. Huge tires. They look so killer. We've been running the 37s on Honcho, and I would tell you what, every time I come over here to the 40s, they're just such a bigger tire and look really cool. We're also trying to fit everything underneath this massive Fiberworks hood. I love the white. I think it looks killer. I also like the Honcho blue over here. So I don't know, let me know in the comments what color you think. I'm thinking the white with some black logos on there is really going to look trick on this truck. Here is something really cool. We just got these things in, and I don't know if you've been paying attention, if you're somebody who does off-roading type stuff, but King has been totally backed up because they're getting so much business. When you build quality, you get a lot of business, and these guys just build some amazing stuff. Where do we get this stuff? We picked this up from Down South Motorsports. I'll tell you what, I went down there and probably spent about 2 hours with Sonny walking around Honcho and talking about how we're going to order these, and he got us totally dialed in. You know, really set us up, especially with these coilovers, you know, for a great deal on how he said, you know, we're going to set the coilovers, these 3.5-inch bypasses. I just think they look amazing. We went with some remote reservoirs for both of these this time, and then some 2.5-inch bump stops. So the other part of this is figuring out, you know, how these are going to fit underneath the truck, and it shouldn't be too tough. On Honcho, we went with 14-inch stroke bypasses and coilovers. We went with 12 inches this time on these shocks to give us a little bit better time fitting them underneath the hood. One of the bad things though is that you order these things, they got to be ordered about 10 months lead time, and so by time these things show up, you just are hoping that they're going to fit underneath your hood. But it's nice having them here. I've just measured them. I measured the distance from eyelet to eyelet in the fully compressed and the fully extended, and we'll go ahead and work with those dimensions as we get to the programs. And the last part here is what we're doing underneath this massive hood. And what I've done is I've kind of drawn out how everything is going to lay out. I made a couple marks using my plumb bob on the floor and pretty much draw out as much as I can so there's no surprises. There is the engine cradle, or at least half of it drawn out. And it's a little bit wider than Honcho's engine cradle. And then a couple other points. This will be the point where basically the front line, the front tires are centered on. Right here, this will also be where all the suspension is. So I know that, you know, that the suspension is Z from the floor, the body is 52 minus 18 inches. I'm not going to do math in public, but that's what everything has got to fit underneath this massive cavernous hood here. That should be pretty cool. And then coming all the way over to the front, I took a couple of the height to the hood there, and it should be pretty easy to keep everything in width-wise. The height will be an issue to make sure that we don't have bump stops going through the hood, because those bump stops will be sitting right about here. These things are just huge in these cans. You should see the 4-inch ones. They're even bigger. So these things are just massive. They're so beefy. And when you hit them all the way down to compression, you know it. I think that's how we snapped our last transmission. Anyway, we'll go ahead and let's go ahead and take a quick look at Honcho before we jump into the computer. And we're going to be using a lot of cool software today. We're going to be using some Fusion 360. We're going to be using a whole bunch of BendTech. And then we're also going to be using some of the Race Aspirations to get some of the geometries of the suspension and making sure they're going to work for us. But let's go ahead and take a quick look at Honcho. Okay, one of the nice things about this being our second build and still having Honcho here is that we have something to look at to reference as we get some of those dimensions that we're going to use in the Lefty build. So Honcho really worked well in some places, and then there were some areas that I would change. And some of the things I learned is that this whole pillar right here, you see how the A arm kind of has to go and really reach around it down to over here. This bump stop was an afterthought and all those kinds of things. What I'm doing now on this build, you can kind of see, is I'm going to try to line this bump stop up on this pillar. I'm basically bringing the wheel forward now to where this A arm doesn't have to go around this structure right here. Line everything up just a little bit better. The lower suspension should pretty much be the same. And here is one of the things I really liked. This was one of my own ideas here. Not all of my ideas. Sometimes I take them from other people, but the steering was definitely my idea, to where I am using the steering box out of a Chevy Silverado 2500 HD. And this worked really well. And we're doing the same thing. This time I have a 2013 box, but pretty much doing the same thing where I'm making my own pitman arm and slider. I will change some of the design of that slider such that it's easier to take out and put back in, and then also has it's a little easier to do maintenance on. And then you see these boots over here, they get pinched in there. And we're going to design it this time such that there is more freedom of movement for those boots to help protect that slider in there. But besides that, it should look pretty much the same functionally how this one works. Okay, so we're picking up the front end of this chassis from where we left off last time, and this was video number 1. And some of the keys here to video number 1 was how I got some of the pick points to make sure that the chassis or the roll cage would stay inside the fiberglass and look normal. And this video is going to be how we make the front end of the car, the suspension, and how basically the engine is contained inside there. And we designed it such that we can take the engine out. So that's what we are getting to today. And it's a little bit different than getting the pick points over here, because a lot of it has to do with suspension geometry. So where do I get that? Let's go over to our suspension geometry calculator, and this is from Race Aspirations. Now there is a link in the description below on how you get there, and then also those guys are really generous. I get nothing from it, but they gave a discount for using their suspension geometry calculator, and it's only a couple bucks anyway, so it's totally worth doing, especially if you're doing something like this. I've been watching videos, and I was using cardboard and stuff like that to mock it up, and this just makes it totally faster, and you can really see how the vehicle is going to react with the suspension that you design, whether it's in straight up and down in suspension as it moves, or as a car body rolls and that kind of stuff, and you see how the tires will react. On there are some other things. You can turn this thing off, and you can kind of, put the suspension in a certain position. You can check out some of the ways that it will react, and it has definitions for a lot of these terms on there, or you can look them up on the internet. And then also you can go in here, what's really cool. And this right now is the dimensions that I've kind of settled on going back and forth. But, just to kind of compare to other suspensions that we've had in the past, we had something that looked more like this, where I kind of called it a parallel box, where the upper and the lower suspension arms were exactly the same. And we did that just, basically out of a lack of maybe knowledge of suspension knowledge. And then also just trying to make sure I remove bump steer. But I have been watching some videos, and the one I go to is Shock Therapy. Links in the description below for videos for Shock Therapy. Those guys are awesome at explaining this stuff, and I recommend you go there and check these guys out. But you can kind of see as the suspension goes up and down, some of the things that aren't good is you can kind of watch over here. The tire patch is, as it moves up and down, that tire patch moves it back and on. That's called, I think it's called scrub. And then also as the car kind of rolls, you see that tire basically always stays in that orientation. And if I go back to the refresh the page and goes back to the file that I saved, which is my suspension geometry, you can kind of see as the car rolls and goes in, that tire kind of stays normalized. As the suspension goes down, the tires kind of tuck up into the hood. A lot of, I think, benefits of the short long arm suspension, which this calculator kind of helps you nail. Now I need to figure out, okay, how do I convert this into pick points? So this next goal is, let's transfer what we have here into pick points. And let me show you. Now,
I will say that there are a lot of people that are smarter. Oftentimes when they are smarter, and I totally appreciate this, is they put the information, they send a comment. And I tell you, I read all the comments, and a lot of times I follow the comments, or I purchase stuff based off of comments that people made. I read them all the time. I find that one of the best resources after, in my videos are the comments with some really smart people. So please, if you got something or a better way to do it, please let me know and I'll add that to a future video. Anyway, here's what I do. I go and I need to convert this into some kind of a picture file, and then I'm going to drop it into Fusion 360. So, and this is very useful for other type things, like if you're plasma cutting and you want to cut a picture or something like that. This is very useful for that. So I will go kind of slowly so you see what I'm doing, because this is very useful. Anyway, I'm gonna hit the control key and then print screen, and that's going to put this picture into the clipboard. I don't know how to turn this into a PNG other than to do this. I'm going to go over to my PowerPoint, and then from here I'm going to hit Control V or paste, and I'm going to put that picture. This is just my screenshot picture. Now it's on to PowerPoint. I will generally go in here, and I'm just going to go ahead and crop it real quick, just to eliminate all the kind of noise, I guess, that's going to be in the picture around it here. So actually, I'm going to hit Control Z. I'll make sure I don't mess up dimensions when I do this thing. All right, so I want to maintain at least dimensionally in relation to each other what those things are. And then now I've got that picture, and I will just make it a little bit bigger here. Doesn't really matter with that. But anyway, just as long as it remains dimensionally accurate here as far as like proportion to each other. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit File, and I'm going to say Save As. And I am putting it into some CAD pics is where the folder is going to go. But one of the things I'm going to do is, and I guess I could have done it right there, but I want to save this as a PNG. And that's basically a picture file. And when I hit save, I'm going to say, it already exists. Yeah, I want to replace it. But I just want just this one slide is going to be that picture. Let's go over to Fusion 360. Now here is, again, something that maybe not a lot of guys know how to do. So let me go kind of slowly and show you what I'm doing. Across the top bar over here, you have something that says Insert. Click on Insert, and then you go down to the very obvious word Canvas. You click on Canvas, and that's going to allow you to upload a picture into Fusion 360. I'm going to click on the option down there that says Pull it away from get it from my computer, and I'm going to this CAD Pics. Obviously, I have another one over here, which I will do it again. But anyway, I'm getting the CAD pic over there. I'm going to double click on that. And then now I've got to pick a plane. Now, if you're plasma cutting, like I always do it on the Crossfire XR. By the way, if you're looking for a Crossfire plasma table, use code NTD Racing and you get $100 off. And I get a kickback too, which helps us pay for tires. So if you are doing plasma cutting, then I generally like to do everything on the Y and the X axis, because that's what the plasma cutters cut on anyways. If you're doing that, you just click on that plane right there, and it brings the picture up there. Now, the dimensions don't make any sense. It's the way it is right now. It's okay. Hit OK. So now the picture is on your Fusion 360. Come over here to the left side, and it says Canvas. You hit the arrow to expand it, and it says, here's your CAD picture that you wanted. I'm going to go ahead and right click, and then right down here it says Calibrate. Now what we're going to do is make this picture like if inch for inch the same as our design. So what I mean by that is I'm going to tell it the space between here and here. In my case, in the real design I'm doing, this right here between that point and this point right over here, let me just get as close as I can what I think the center of this blob is, but is that distance is 6.5 inches. So 6.5 IN for inches. Now that it's black, it's saying, okay, I think I know what you want me to do. I'm gonna hit enter. I'm gonna scroll out, and then now this thing is dimensionally correct. So if I said measure from here to here, it would tell me that it's 6.5 inches, and then I can start working all the other dimensions off there also. Okay, now let's go ahead, and then from here, how do we get some pick points? This is how I'm going to do it, and you can kind of, maybe you'll get some ideas for how you would do something like this for yourself. So first thing I want to do is I'm going to say sketch. I'm going to sketch on that same plane, and I'm just sketching not to build anything, but just to help me pull dimensions off of this thing. First off is I have some hardware that I will be putting on this lower A-arm. The hardware over here is a bushing, and the sleeve for that bushing is 2 inches. I'm going to hit hotkey C. When I say hotkey C, that means I'm hitting the keyboard for a C. And if you look over here for the circle, hotkey C, it shows you right there, is a center diameter circle. So if I hit hotkey C, it turns my cursor into a circle. I can roll in here and I say, this is exactly where that circle is going to happen. And I hit number 2, it's going to be a 2-inch circle. And there is one of the bearings that will hold the suspension. On the other end over here, I'm using a uniball. Now the uniball cup that I'm going to be using, hotkey C again, I'm going to scroll, I'm going to try and grab the center, aim small, miss small, is going to be 2.6 inches in diameter. So there, now I have both ends of that. Now the way that we build our suspensions, it is a flat skin all the way across the top, the suspension arms, and then the bottom kind of comes down, and wherever the shock is going to land, it gets thick, and then it gets thin again on the other side. Basically, almost like a bridge or an arch bridge or something like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my line over here, and I'm going to grab the side of that circle, and then I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to let it snap to a you can kind of see the constraint over here, which is where it is tangential over there. It isn't over here. And sometimes if you try to say, come over here, make it tangential, you grab this line and this line, you can kind of see that circle moved a little bit. I'm going to hit Control Z because it just moved my dimensions. But what I can do is I can come over to this point, I can right click on it, I can say fix, and now it won't let that circle move. And so now when I say make it tangential, and it looks like it already is over there, then it won't move that point. So those points are tangential. And so now what I need to do, later on I will find the center of that. The other part of this is just the way that I am building this truck. Remember, I have a 4x4 inch square that this thing is going to mount to. This point right here will mount to a tab. Since this thing is 2 inches in diameter, I'm going to give myself a 1/4 inch on the bottom. So this tab comes off of the 4x4 by 1¼ inches, and then it goes down 1¼ inches. So just some math, I'm going to hit hotkey L. I'm going to turn on construction lines, just out of habit there. I'm going to come over here, 90 degrees off, or, it says 180 degrees. And it's going to be 3.25 to find the center. That's just, I did the math already. That's the center of where that 4x4 square is. I don't think it stayed. Let me see. I'm going to go one more time here. Hotkey L. I think my mouse moved 3.25. All right. And then I'm going to hit hotkey L again. And again, just the center is going to be 3/4 inch up here, 0.75. Now this is the center of my square box. So I'm going to go ahead, and there's no hotkey for this one. I could probably add one in there, but I like to use center rectangles a lot. I'm going to go from the center, and it's going to be a 4-inch tab, 4-inch, and enter. And that's where the center box is going to be. And you kind of see now a tab will kind of come down over here, and there'll be a through bolt in here to allow the suspension to kind of move up and down. So there's that point. The other point I need to find now for the pick points is some point up here where this tube, which is going to kind of come up, will terminate. Now, something else I need to calculate for is the fact that I have an engine that's going to be in here, and that engine's got to come straight up through the top whenever I want to pull the engine out. The width of the engine, if I leave the headers on, which it sure would be nice to be able to leave the headers on, from extreme to extreme is 25¼ inches. So let's shoot for 26 inches. Now, remember that the pick points are going to be from the centers of the tubes. So if the engine's got to be, it's going to be 26 inches wide, then the center of those tubes, you got to add one on both sides. So that's 28 inches. So half of that is going to be 14. So I'm going to hit the hotkey R. That's going to give me my rectangle. I'm going to turn on construction lines just so it gives me a dotted line. And I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to make that bottom value, because half of 28 is going to be 14. And then I'm going to let the vertical value tab, just somewhere off the page. So I'm going to say 70 inches, just so I have that line out there. And then now I've got, this is the half of the dimension for, where this point's going to be over here. Now the other part is I took the dimensions of my shocks. I took the dimensions of them when they were compressed, the shocks and all the coilovers and also the bypasses. And then I also took the distance of those things when they're totally extended. As it turns out, it's just almost exactly 12 inches, the difference between the totally compressed and totally extended distances there. Now the distance of the bypass, which is the tallest one, is 21 3/4 inches, and we might as well just call that 22 inches, just for the measuring purposes that we're going to do right now. So 22 inches from the center of the eye to the center of the eye. Now, if you take a look at Honcho, or you look at the way we mount the suspension, the mounting hole needs to be about 1 inch from whatever it is mounting to, like the side of the structure. So that just means that we can add another 2 inches to the, so now we're looking at 24 inches when that thing's totally compressed. And then since we're mounting it on the bottom part, right here, we're mounting it to a flat surface. So there's no addition that we need to add right there. But on the top up here, it's going to be mounted to a round tube. Now, again, we got to add in that 1 more inch for the round tube. So now we're up to a total of 25 inches is how long that thing is going to be when it's totally compressed. Now, since the tube or the bypass will move up and down, let me go back over here to this picture. Since it's going to move up and down, what I'm looking for is 12 inches in compression, and I'm looking for 10 inches in when it goes down. I'm not sure what they call that. And to get to that, I'm going to put the shock somewhere about in the middle. So you can almost cut those in half. So I'm looking for basically 6 inches in compression from the shock or the bypass, and I'm looking for 5 inches in rebound out of that. So some of those are 11, and that gives me about a 1/2 inch on each side to where I can either limit it by a strap, or I can limit it by the bump stop and make sure that I'm not actually hitting the limit of the shock before I, and damage the shock before I hit the bump stop. So that's where those numbers will come from. So now I know that I want that shock, when it is sitting at this ride height right here, I want it to be at 6 inches of travel remaining before it hits the bump stop. So I add 6 now to that total 25. That gives me 31 inches is the number I'm looking for right now. So I'm going to go back over to Fusion 360. And now I know now I know 31 inches. I'm going to hit hotkey L. And I'm going to come down over here to this line. And you can kind of see as I go across, it goes pop. There's the midpoint. There's the midpoint. So that's where I want that line to start. This 31-inch line. So now what I can do is I can say, it's highlighted over there. I'm going to say 31. And I'm going to lock in that value of 31 inches. And so now as I swing this thing back and forth, the only thing that changes is the angle changes, but the 31 does not change. Now remember, I want that tube to rest right on this line. So I'm going to scroll in here as best I can. Sometimes, yep, there we go. It's snapped. And then now this is where that tube is going to intersect with the shock, the extended 31 inches intercepts with where the tube is there to avoid the engine. Now if I hit hotkey C and I scroll in here, and right at that point, if I go 2 inches, there, now I have that other tube right there. And so this is basically the pick point. And I can go rectangle now, and I can start right here, and I can go all the way up to this point. And this just helps me take the measurements off there. Now I know that pick point is 14 inches to the right, or to the left in this case, when I do the pick point. And then it is up 31.421 inches. And that gives me an exact value right there. Now I can kind of see, okay, now, but I've just done all this, and I've basically done the dimension in relation to the engine. What I really want to do is check to make sure, does that dimension work with the design of the suspension that I'm doing? So I need to deal with this point right here. Now I'm using 3/4 inch rod ends right here. And in general, again, if I give myself 1 inch of spacing from where the rod end mounts to the mounting point, then that gives me enough clearance inside there. And then again, there's a 2-inch round tube, so that needs to be another inch. So I'm going to say hotkey L, and then from this point, I'm going to move in 2 inches. And 2 inches, I'm going to hit enter. And then now this is the point where I think that tube is going to go. I'm going to get hotkey C so you can see what I'm talking about. This tube is going to come straight out right here. And this is where I think that this tube is going to go. But now just to keep things simple, I don't like miracles of engineering. I want this to be a straight line and that tube coming straight off of this vertical tube right here, or I guess this tube that's at an angle. So let's just see how close we were. Let's go over to this point right here, and then we'll draw a straight line to this tube right here. And this will be the 2-inch tube that goes all the way up there. And if we come in here, we see, man, we got lucky. That is pretty darn close. In fact, if I start at the center of that tube, I come straight over to this line, you can see that I basically miss it by 0.136 inches, close enough when you're, dealing with desert racing and that kind of stuff. So that is pretty darn good. So now I have all the points that I need. And I can do one more thing here. And again, there's so many things you need to design for. I'm going to need to design for how the steering box is going to go in here, the lower A-arm doesn't strike it. But then I also need to figure out, well, will I be able to put my bump stop in here? So let's go ahead and take a look at that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back over to our suspension design. I'm going to put this thing on to where it holds it in place, and I'm going to take it down to its full bump. So it started at 19 inches. And if I can just get all the way down to 7 inches right there, this is what the suspension will look like when it's all the way down at its full compression. And I'm going to go, again, control, print screen for this. I'm going to go back over to my PowerPoint and do the same thing. I'm going to put that into my PowerPoint. Once again, I'm going to go ahead and right click. I'm going to crop this thing to take it down to a more manageable size. I only want half of it. So there we go. There's my point, and then I'm just going to expand it, and I'm going to say File, Save As. I wanted to go back into that same folder there, and I'm going to say Pick Point. I'm going to just call this number 2. There we go. CAD Pix 2. I'm going to make it a PNG. Save. I'm going to go back just this one file. I'm going to go back over to Fusion 360. And then once again, I'm going to go back to Insert and Canvas. Go back to my computer. There is that number 2. I'm going to bring that one in there. And I'm going to want it to go right on that same face. So now it's in there, and I say, okay. So now that picture is right there. You're like, man, this thing is small. Well, here we go. We're just going to go back over to this thing. We're going to right click. We're going to calibrate it. I'm going to zoom all the way in as close as I can. And I'm going to say, again, find as best I can the center of that one. I'm going to go in. I'm going to find the center of that one. This is 6.5 IN for inches. I'm going to hit enter. Scroll back out. And then now they're the same size. I'm going to go back over here again, and I'm going to say edit canvas. And when I do that, it gives me this option right here to where now I can move it around. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do my best to basically superimpose this one right over top of the other one as best as I can. And there we go. Now all of those points are superimposed on top of each other. I'll hit OK. Now what I can do is I can say, okay, now this suspension arm went from here all the way up to here. Now I know there's ways to put joints in there, but I'm just going to do this really quickly. I'm going to hit hotkey C. I'm going to go over to this point. And remember, that was 2.6 inches. 2.6. And I'm going to draw that line again. So hotkey L. I'm going to start from this point. I'm going to go all the way down over to here. And okay, now I have that suspension arm drawn in the full compressed mode there at 12 inches of up suspension. I hit hotkey L again. I'm going to find the center of that shock, and I go back up to where the shock is going to mount, and that should be less than 25 inches, and I have 25.3. So that tells me that when I hit full bump, I still have 0.3 inches of shock travel before I bottom that shock out. So that is exactly what I want. That looks pretty good. Now what I could do, and one of the things that I'd like to have happen, is that when that shock is at full compression, it is at more of a 90-degree angle. Unfortunately, you would kind of see that to make that happen, it would be over, right about here at 23 inches. So I would be giving up a little bit of shock travel to make that happen. But that would be ideal for that thing to be at 90 degrees once it hits its limit of the travel. So there's probably somewhere in here where there is a compromise, and it's probably, somewhere along this arm, as opposed to being halfway down, it's probably, maybe about, a couple inches off of center, and then we kind of get some happy medium. We'll work with that later on. But right now we know that sure enough with this suspension geometry, it sets up. The last thing that I need to kind of take a look at is the bump stops and where I'm going to land the bump stops. Now those bump stops are about 8 inches long. I don't have one with me right now, but that's what it is. So if I look at this arm right here, hotkey L, I'm just going to draw a line because, again, the bump stop's just like I think almost even more critical than the suspension. You want those things to terminate at a 90-degree angle from the bump stop. So if I say hotkey L and I come over here and I draw a line, you can see it snaps to a 90-degree there, and as I draw it out to about, parallel to this point over here. I'm going to go escape. This is kind of like one of those things where since I'm not actually making something, I'm just using this for dimensions. I don't want to hit enter on it. So I'm going to hit that again. I'm going to draw it out here. And there is my point out there at a 90-degree angle from that bump stop. I want that bump stop to land right up, basically almost on top of that uniball. Is over 9 inches. So what that tells me is I will be able to make the mount for the bump stop to go there. And more importantly is on that mount is realize that on top up here, this is where the nut that holds the whole bump stop together inside the can goes. So I will be able to make some kind of a structure that comes over here, holds this bump stop can, and then I will be able to bolt that thing on there and slide it out and take it apart and those kinds of things. So from here, I'm able to validate, okay, now at least all these dimensions look good for the suspension geometry and the way that I'm going to build the roll cage and the front end of the chassis. Let's go ahead now, and we got our values off of here. Let's go ahead and turn those into pick points. Now put those into our BendTech. Okay, so now that we have those pick points, at least the values for them from the Fusion 360, now we can go ahead and put that into the BendTech. And I'll fumble through this here a little bit, and it might change over time. But let's at least get the space around the engine and the front suspension put in there. I'll show you how to do that. So we go to pick points, and again, this one pick point I want is going to start off of the front of the engine, of the cradle here, the engine cradle. Will be our reference at the 0 point, as it turns out. And that is going to be something a little bit different. We're going to go with what's called the angle here. And the angle, I want this thing to be at 6 degrees up. So everything forward of the engine cradle will be sloped up at 6 degrees. And that'll be, I think they call it a tack angle is what that will be. So I'm going to select this. And so it shows you here is that the angle I'm going to make this thing goes from 0 to 90. And I want it to be 6 degrees up. I already put it in here earlier. And then I want it to move forward 18 inches. So that's exactly what I want. So I'm going to hit apply on that. And there you go. There is that point that's out there. And then now if I go in here and pick my 4x4 inch 120 wall, the strongest substance known to man, and I put it in there. And I say, okay. And then now you can see that piece is in there. And if we kind of look at it over here, projected out from the side, you can kind of see, okay, that thing is sloped up at 6 degrees out there. Now, I want it to continue out there. I needed that pick point, but I want it to continue out there for an additional 18 inches, and that's going to be the space that I will use to mount the steering. So I'm going to go back to pick points, and I'm going to say along a line, and I'm going to pick this line as my reference. And I want this thing to be, 18 inches. Well, 18 inches from where? If I swap ends, it doesn't work. But if I go in here and I say from negative 18 inches, then it'll kind of put it out there. The negative will put it the opposite direction. And I can apply that and put that there. Okay, so now I have that point, and then I can go and say, all right, continue this tube straight out to there and say, okay. So now I have that tube out there. And now I need to put the engine cradle on there. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to go back to this angle again. I'm going to clear all the values in that, and the pick point is going to be this one. And I want it to be in the vertical again, and it goes 0 to 90, but I want that thing to be tilted back, because remember the first one was 6, the next one has got to be 96, which will give it a 90-degree angle from this pick point. And I want this one to go towards the ceiling, and the value is going to be 31.42 inches towards the ceiling. And then I'm going to apply that. And from there, I'm going to do 2 more pick points. And I'm going to clear all these values off of this one. And remember, I want that thing to be left and right 14 inches. So there's 14 left. I don't want front. I want to go left. 14. Apply. I must have added something wrong. Oh, I got you. It needs to have a value, so I'll put 0 back in there. So 14 and apply, and rate 14 and apply. Don't make the machine mad. And then I'm going to take these straight pieces. This will be 2-inch DOM, and that'll go to there. And then there'll be a tube across there. And again, now you can kind of go back to me, and you can kind of see how that's going to look. And if we, again, one of the things that helps is if you just give yourself a projection from the side, you can kind of see, okay, now this is 90 degrees from that. It's leaning back at about 6 degrees from vertical. Perfect. That's what I want. So the next thing we need to do is we need to pick the pick points that are going to be along this line. And in this case, from what we took off of Fusion 360 by taking the dimensions, again, I'm going to do pick points along a line. I'm going to pick this line, and I'm going to say that is going to be, it was 16.94 inches is how high that thing is going to be on that. I'm going to hit apply, and then I'm going to reference this other one. And I'm going to hit apply. And then now I have a tube. This is going to be the rear side of that upper A-arm mount. Okay, so now I have these pick points. I basically want to mirror the same ones right above this pick point. And the way I'm going to do that is go back to this angle function. And I'm going to pick front. I want that thing to be 6 degrees up again and 18 inches off of this pick point right here, and you can see there's that one there. I'll hit apply, and then I'm going to do the same on this one and hit apply again. And then now I can start connecting all these things together. I want 2-inch DOM for my suspension mounting points, and then I will close that off like that. And then now you kind of get an idea of how the front of this thing is going to look. Now let's go ahead and close in the engine. For that, pretty simple. I'm going to go ahead, again, go to pick points. I'm going to get single pick points, clear all the values. And if I come over here, it should allow me to snap to the center of that tube to pick that reference point. I'm going to go left, the same value, 14 inches, and apply. I'm going to go right 14 inches, and then apply. So there, now I got some more pick points, and now I can start closing that in. This is kind of cool because it starts to happen pretty quickly. I'm going to grab that one. I'm going to go to there and go to there. And then I want to kind of also close this in, again, make triangles to shore up that corner. I'm going to hit escape on this. I don't want to pick that point. Straight. That point there, and then that one's going to go there. I'm going to go from here to here again and make some more triangles. And then this will come down here and here. And in some way later on at some point, I'll figure out how I'm going to reach out and grab the body, and probably do a little more thinking about that. So this might look a little different from the final one, but somehow I've got to bring the structure out just a little bit to make sure I have something to grab the body that I'm going to use. And that'll probably be a smaller, maybe 1-inch tube structure. But for right now, this is kind of what this thing's going to look like. Now, some of the things I need to kind of concern myself with is if you look at the side of this thing, it's kind of looking a lot like Honcho, to where this is a box. It's not necessarily a triangle. So I need to kind of start figuring out how I'm going to shore this thing up. So just in case the shocks are here and we take a massive load right here, it doesn't basically distort this thing in the vertical. Now that makes it a little bit challenging, because if you kind of look at the top view, you can see that any of the tubes I want to kind of bring in and maybe terminate at this node right here will interfere with the shocks and where they're going to be, because they're basically coming off of this tube right here. So what I think I'm going to do is, I'll kind of show you here, is I'm going to make some tubes that kind of come around, reach up and grab this thing in a couple places. And I think that it'll do a good job, because Honcho never gave way. And if I figure if I add some support, then Lefty will do about the same as far as performance goes. So what I will do is I'm going to go pick points again. And what I want to do is I'm going to kind of come off of this pick point. I'm going to clear all the values. And I want to go to the right. Let me see. I'm going to go to the right 3 inches. And then I want to go back. That's not what I want. I want 3 inches, and I think I'm going to go back about 5 inches. And that should take that point just outside of the square tube there as far as a place for those tubes that kind of to land there. And I'm going to do the same for the other side, but I'm going to go left. And then what I want to do is come off of this tube here. I'm going to clear all the values. And from this tube, I just want to, on a line, I want this thing to come back about 16 inches is what I figure. And what that'll do is allow me to support it here and put shocks in the middle and hope that that thing doesn't bend. I know hope is not a good plan, but that's what we're doing. Okay. Reference there and do the same one there. And reference that one. I didn't put it there. You got to remember to hit apply. Okay, so there you go. And then from here, what I'm going to do is across the bottom over here where your feet are going to go, I really would like that to be a 2-inch DOM tube. And actually, I need that one to terminate at the body. So I don't think that, if I look at it, let's take a look, I bet you it doesn't land all the tube, it leaves a gap. So we've actually got to bring that one all the way in. So I'm going to go ahead and erase a pick point here. So a little error. I'm going to say delete. I'm going to delete that tube and that pick point. I'm just going to come back from that one right there. Let's go pick points. Let's just go from that. Let's go single from this one. Let's just come straight back. I think I was saying back, clear all values, 5 inches, and apply. And then over here, the same kind of thing, 5 inches. And apply. Now that kind of gets lost in there. I'm going to go back and delete this pick point. All right, so now when I come in here and I make some straight tubes between here and here, and then there and there, and that's what that's going to look like. Those tubes will terminate there. So when I go and put my cut in, even though, you know, with pick points, it appears as if that thing goes 2 inches into there. When I apply the cut, it'll cut it off right there. And so now what I want to do is be able to, I'm going to come out a little bit and I'm going to come straight off of that tube in the vertical. And that'll help me clear the engine, clear the mounts and all those kinds of things. So I'm going to go, again, a pick point. I'm going to go along this line. So a line, I'm going to clear this out. I'm going to say, let's say 4 inches. That should give me room to do what I want to do. And I'm going to go along this line. I'm going to apply it there. And then I'm going to go along this, apply, reference, this one, and apply. Now I'm going to go ahead and start reaching out and grabbing some of those other nodes and seeing if I can't kind of shore this thing up. So I'm going to go straight. Now these things are going to be kind of stringers and support. They're not necessarily protecting heads and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to use my 1.5 inch DOM. And I'm going to reach up here and grab some of these points. And now we can kind of see how this cage is going to hold together. This will give you a better kind of idea. So we look at this. The shocks will be sitting right inside of here. And you can kind of look down inside and you can see that I will indeed be able to miss this tube with the shocks while they're down there. I'll be able to mount the shocks side by side right here and reach down and grab the suspension arm that's going to come out there. And then as you look over here from the side, resistance to any kind of major hit from the top will be from just the rigidity of the tubes themselves, which I wouldn't count on, but then also this triangle right here, and then eventually kind of this will also help resist. So not ideal. If the ideal thing would be to go from this node right here to this node, but that will run into suspension. So I will not do that on this one. So that's what we're going to do with that. So let me go and finish that up on the other side. Kind of close in that also. So I went from here to there to that one, and then that one to here. And then there's the kind of the front of the roll cage, and that's how that's going to look. and then the suspension have all their mounting points and all that kind of stuff. So, now I kind of want to verify, and this will be maybe the last thing I do on this video, is I want to verify, will this actually fit a tire underneath? So how do I do that? How am I going to check that out? Now, there's a lot of guys who are super smart with CAD and can do all this stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this thing and I'm going to put it into Fusion 360. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say File, Save As, cancel that. I'm going to say File, Export, actually. Export, and I want to export a step file. I'm going to go over to my folder over here. Let me see, I should have on my desktop, I have a folder called Lefty's Files, Step Files. And I'm going to name it this, which I've been tinkering with already today. So I'm going to save, I want to replace that one. So I'm going to save the step file. There's somewhere I can find it when I open up Fusion 360. So I'm going to open up a new page on Fusion 360, and then I'm going to go over to the files, and I'm just going to say open. And I'm going to open from my computer. And I was already doing this earlier, so I'm on my step files. I'm going to pick the Lefty step file, and it's going to import that, the step file. There's my file that I have in there. I'm going to take a look at how this thing looks over here. So now that I'm looking at this thing from the side, what I want to do is just like I would normally do, I want to create a sketch. I'm going to sketch it on this plane. Now my tire is going to sit right here on this line, and it's going to be pretty much aligned right with the bottom, roughly somewhere in there is where that tire is going to be. So I'm going to hit hotkey C, and right about here, I'm going to go ahead and put it in the tire. Now, you see that it's in millimeters right now. Let me escape out of that. I'm going to go over to the document settings. I'm going to go over to units, and I'm going to change this to inches so it's in language I can speak. I'm going to hit hotkey C again. And from right about here, now my tires are 40 inches, and they're actually slightly less than 40 inches, but Milestar, which makes an amazing tire, is making a 42-inch tire. And Milestar, if you ever wanted to give me a 42-inch tire, this would be awesome. Right now I got 40s, but I'm going to go ahead and make sure that when Milestar wants to give me 42s, that I can put a 42-inch tire in there. Now so I made the circle. There's the tire. Hotkey E for extrude. I'm going to click on that. This thing I'm going to extrude, and now I'm going to make it 13.5 inches, and that's the width of my tire. Now remember, anytime you extrude in Fusion 360, is before you hit that enter key, you need to come over here, because I think it just changed from join to cut. That's not what I would do. I want to make a new body, and as soon as I hit this, a body's going to show up over here somewhere. There's a lot of bodies here. So now you're like, well, that's awesome, dude. Look at your tire in the middle of your car. Well, all I'll do now is, okay, I think I did say okay to that. Anyway, now I'm going to go ahead and hit hotkey M, and I'm going to select my tire, and I'm just going to go ahead and move it into about the position it's going to be. And that looks like it's right about there. In fact, it's probably sitting just slightly more inside, but I think that it'll do a better job of me making sure that this thing is going to not hit anything. And so as I look at here right now, it looks, sure enough, it's not going to hit anything. Now, there's a lot of guys, again, who are a lot smarter than me on Fusion 360 and can make this whole thing a system and move and all that. This is what I'm going to do, is I'm going to rotate this thing. First, I'm going to say okay, because I've already moved my tire. I'm going to rotate this thing over here. I'm going to hit hotkey M again. And then now I want it to move right about this point in the center, and I'm going to click on that point. And then now all the movement it's going to do is going to be based off the center of that circle. I'm going to go back over to looking at it from this side. I'm going to kind of drop it on its side right here. And then now what I want to do is I want to just see what happens as I steer the tire, steer the wheel. Now realize I'm using some uniballs, and the maximum I can turn those things is 32 degrees in the orientation. So here is the maximum that tire will ever turn. And I can kind of look inside there and say, you know what, a 42, not even a 40, a 42 is going to clear all of my tubes. Well, that's awesome. I think that's good news. I'm going to go ahead and go back to looking at it from the top. I'm going to steer it back to straight forward, back to 0 degrees. I'm going to flip it back on its side over here. And then now I want to see, what does it look like in full bump? Well, in full bump, it's going to travel up about, I'm going to zoom in here so I get the right increments moving. It's going to move up about 12 inches right there. And it's going to move back just about an inch, maybe slightly more, but that's what it's going to move. And then now, if I move and take a look at this thing, again, I haven't hit any tubes. And if I look at it right from the top and rotate it to my 35 degrees, there it is right there, at full bump, again, I can kind of look inside there. And what I was looking at before, I've been tinkering with this a little bit today, is I was hitting this tube. So I had to kind of drop this one back a little bit more. But now you can see at full bump and full lock of the steering wheel that it misses all of those tubes. So I'm happy with that. I think that that's going to be a good design, and I will stick with that. Kind of cool. You're able to clearance all that stuff. So I'll go back over here to my BendTech, and then from here, just kind of some more tube placement to kind of shore everything up. Some of the tubes that we'll be putting in from here will be kind of coming off the top of the roll cage down to there. There will also probably will be another 2-inch tube from here going straight back to the center, and then from the centers out to the corners out over here. And then from there in the back, we will also be shoring up from these corners, probably coming straight back down to the center or something like that. And as I think about it, it'll probably actually go the opposite direction. But obviously, there's a lot more tubes that will go in here. At the end of the day, we'll probably end up cutting more than 100 tubes, which will be 200 individual welds to make this whole thing go together. But we're not there yet. We're about to hit the back end where we're going to close in that whole thing and go all the way out to the rear of the truck. So I'll be showing you how I locate the bump stops, the rear, how I pull the fuel tank in there, and then also kind of some of the geometry that I'm going to use for the rear suspension and some of the calculators I used for that. That will be for the next video. So this one's already getting pretty long, so we're going to go ahead and wrap this one up, and it'll look pretty much like this when you see the final product. There will be a couple things that will change, but for the most part, this is what Lefty's going to look like. I think it's looking pretty cool. I'm pretty excited about it.
All right, not long now, and we will be at BendTech cutting these tubes out. So I'm going to go ahead in the next video. We're going to tighten up the design for the rear of the truck. We're going to talk about how to get around the axle, placing the bump stops, getting the fuel tank in, where we're going to carry the tires, and some of the other supplies. We'll go ahead and get that in the next video, and I hope you will consider joining us for that one. Please consider again hitting that like and subscribe, ringing the bell for notification of future episodes. Anytime you leave a comment in the bottom, again, like I said, it is a great resource for other folks, to read that, and also for me too. I'm learning as I read through those, and I do appreciate all of the comments. And we will see you in the next episode. Take care of yourself.